Hi, I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters Omaha, and tonight we're tying a humpy. This is a yellow humpy right here. Um, and actually, as I get into a little bit of story time here, this was actually the what originated the humpy, and this is called the Tom Thumb. So the humpy originated with an early 19th century fly called the Tom Thumb, which was being tied in the eastern United States, Canada, and England as late as the 1940s. The Tom Thumb was a dry fly with two opposing clumps of deer hair over a colored thread body. This style was modified in the late 1940s by California angler Jack Horner into a pattern he called the Horner deer hair fly. The first version of what is known today as the Humpy. He designed it for the swift rivers of the west slopes of the Rocky Mountains where good flotation is important, and became very popular in California. And then one of Horner's fly customers brought it to fly to the Yellowstone area, and that's where it achieved fly fishing stardom. So fly shop owner Pat Barnes from West Yellowstone was guiding a client in July of 1947 on Cliff Lake, and the client had a brand new bamboo fly rod and insisted that his guide give it a try. Barnes made one cast, and a large trout rose and broke the leader. Pat borrowed a second fly and made a second cast. Bang, another large trout. And when that fish was landed, Barnes discovered two identical flies embedded in the fish's jaw. Barnes removed both flies, stuck the one with the broken tippet in his hat band. And then the next day, customers in his fly shop asked about the fly hanging from his hat. He repeated the story, and the customers immediately wanted some of those goofy looking flies. Pat's wife, Sig Barnes, replicated the fly on the spot, and the fly was given a new name, the Goofus bug. Dan Bailey's fly shop near in Livingston, Montana, enthusiastically promoted the Goofus bugs through the 50s, but it was the fly's more popular nickname that stuck with it to this day, which is the Humpy. Just to give it some credibility, author Randall Kaufman described the Humpy as arguably the greatest surface fly ever devised. And Lefty Kreh said the Humpy is one of the best flies ever invented for turbulent water where many dry flies are quickly drowned. It's not a specific imitation of an insect, but rather it's a suggested pattern that looks buggy, floats like a cork, and has fooled thousands of trout. It's a fly that every serious Western trout fisherman carries, and many Eastern anglers are finding it just as effective. And I would never go trout fishing anywhere, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand, Europe, without a few humpies in my box. That's all what Lefty Kreh said. So the most popular body colors of the humpy are the most popular are the red humpy and the yellow humpy. Black and green are also popular, but one of my favorites has an underbody of peacock herl. So we'll start with the again the Tom Thumb, and I did this one with a chartreuse floss. You can use dubbing. You can use, again, peacock. You can use just thread. For this one, I think, I think I'll use dubbing for this one. So I'm going to switch to the materials camera. And really, this fly is made up of deer hair, no hackle on the Tom Thumb. Deer hair, and then whatever you use for the body. It could even be a thread body. So I'm going to use a size 12 because it'll show up good on the camera. And I'll use a black thread. And I'm just going to lay down a thread base. Now, the deer hair that I have here is, it's a pretty fine deer hair. So it's not going to flare a lot. But I do want it to flare somewhat. So this is kind of a in between the stuff you'd normally use for tails and wings and what you would use for spinning. So I clipped this off the hide, and now I need to clean out the fuzzy underfur and short fibers. So best way I'm going to do that is to grab the tips of the hair like that, and then over the waste bin, just clean that out. I like to use a mustache comb. Does a good job of really getting that nice and clean. Then I'm going to take that and put it in my hair stacker. Stack the tips. So when I pull it out of there, I've got nice even. Pull it out of there.
Can you show us? Oh,
go ahead.
Can you show me how you? Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Can you show me how you use the hair stacker?
Sure. Let me. Zoom way out, and I'll actually point down here a little bit.
You could just switch to your materials camera, Mike.
Well, I could, but that's kind of awkward right now for me because I have it mounted different. So basically, I clipped the hair off real close to the hide here on the piece of hide that I have, and then just take the hair tips down and put it into the hair stacker. Now, this hair stacker, if you're not familiar with it, it's a tube inside this tube. They fit together, and you put the hair in there, and then you tap it. I tap it on the pedestal of my vise, and when you do, it evens up all the tips. So you want to remove the hair in the direction you're going to tie it in. So in this case,
hand down.
Oh,
be out of the camera. There you go.
Back up.
Okay.
So in this case, when I took it out of the stacker, I want the tips to be facing back because I'm going to do the tail first. So I just pull those out like this. I see some short ones there I could get rid of. Now all my tips are aligned. There's one broken one right there. Pull that out. So I want this to be about, I would say, maybe half a hook shank length for the tail. So I'll just line that up right there. And then actually what I'm going to do, I have my thread base. Now I'm going to just return this back toward the front. I'm going to line it up to where I want my tail to be. And then using my thumb, I know now where I need to cut that hair. So I'm going to transfer that to my other hand. and then cut it over the waste bin. Now I'm holding this hair a little bit towards me, and my thread, I want to give my bobbin a counterclockwise spin as if I was looking down on it. What that'll do is cause the thread, see how it reaches back toward my fingertips? If it was spun the other way, when I go to wrap it, my thread's going to go off in another direction. So spinning it counterclockwise as if I'm looking down on it, and that's going to make the thread reach back over those tips. Let me come down over the top of them. Take a couple of wraps and then pull down to secure that. I'm going to take spaced wraps, holding the hair up here on top and a little bit towards me. So then thread torque is taking that and putting it right on top of the hook shank. I wrap that right back to the end. And now I've got my tail. And I want that to flare out like that. So I'm going to come forward a little bit, maybe about to the hook point like that. And I'm going to get some dubbing here. I'll try some of this UV stuff here.
I have a question. Another one.
Go ahead.
Does it naturally flare like that, or did you do something with your fingers that I just missed?
No, I'll get into this a little bit more when I do the Humpy, the next fly. And I'll focus on that with the tail. But, deer hair it's not hollow like a drinking straw, but it is pithy. It has like some air inside the hair. So as you squeeze down on it with the tying thread and you're tying it real tight, that causes that hair to just spread out like that, or flare is what we call it. To control that, I can't do it now that it's flared, but I'll show you on the tail on the next fly. You can do looser wraps toward the tail, but have the tighter wraps further up the hook shank where it's holding the hair tight. But the wraps that are closest toward the end of the tail are looser, so they just kind of gather that tail and they don't flare it. Again, I'll show you that on the tail of the Humpy. So the next thing I need to do is, again, I'm going to advance toward the front here. Not quite as far. I'm going to go to about maybe 1/3 of the hook shank there. And I'm going to take another clump of deer hair, about the same size, and you want this to be nice and long deer hair. If you're using real short deer hair, this isn't going to work out very good. So again, I'll take it by the tips like this. And then all of this short hairs and the under fur, all that needs to come out of there. So I've got that cleaned pretty well. You can see those ends don't have any under fur in them. And I just have the longer hairs. Well, again, I'll go into my hair stacker. Another way to do this, if you're having trouble with your tips not going into the opening, try to do this.
Hey, Sarah.
Whoops.
How are you?
Good.
Good. You watching the fish?
No, I'm watching a video.
Yeah.
Okay. Is to take the butts of your hair and put them the reverse way into the stacker. Hard for me to do that in front of the camera. And then put your stacker together. And then on the bottom of this, there's a little pad. I'm just taking that and just tapping it on the pedestal of my vise. Now in this case, I'm going to open my hair stacker this way because I want those to go out toward the front. Oh, no, I don't. I do want those to go over the back, but I'll show you how that works. Now, again, I've got some shorter ones here. I want to get rid of those because I'm going to need some length here. What I want to do is actually have this fold back so that my wing sticks out over the front. So if I mark my hair from the eye of the hook here, where my thumb is, to the tail, that's going to give me the length that I need so that when I tie that hair down, I can wrap it over the top as a shell back and have that wing come up. And I'll show you how that all works. So here's where I want that to be, right at the end of the, see how I'm lining it up with the end of my tail? So that needs to be tied down back here at the back. So where my thread is right here, I need to have it cut right there. I hope that made sense. So now again, I'll spin my bobbin counterclockwise. Now I'm doing this a little bit farther back than the previous tie-in for a reason. I don't want too much bulk in one spot. So I'm doing this right behind that, tying it down tight. And then in spaced wraps, you see how I'm leaving a little bit of the bulk of that hair, and then I'm going to kind of cinch down on it at the back. So I went really tight right here at the tie-in point, and then I went a little bit looser through here and then really tight right here. What that does is it gives me more of a hump, and it gives me a little bit of flotation because that hasn't been collapsed. So now I'll zoom in a little bit here. So now I'm going to take my dubbing, take a little bit and twist it onto the thread. So now I have that all twisted onto my thread. I'm going to take one spin with it so that it wraps around. I'm going to spin it again and just hold on to the dubbing and wrap forward. And what that's doing is tightening up that dubbing for me. This is kind of a loose, it's kind of a coarse dubbing, and it's kind of hard to get that real tight. I wrap that forward for my underbody. Now when I grab this hair, the tail is staying put, but I have these longer ones right here that I'll fold over the back. I'll press with my finger here to push that hair and make it a nice tight back there. And then I'll hold that, do a couple of loose wraps over it, and just make sure that's right up on top. And then I'll pull straight down, pull that tight. Now I want to wrap in front of that wing to just kind of stand it up a little bit. And then I'll do a whip finish. Another whip finish. Should have room in there to do an actual whip finish. So now we've got that dubbing for the underbody, and then that hump over the back, and then that flared wing. These are good during a caddis hatch. It could look like a crippled emerger, but it could also look like a couple of caddis that maybe got stuck together on the water's surface. Since I didn't do a very good whip finish on that, I will add a little bit of head cement. And that's the Tom Thumb. Again, I like to do that with a peacock body. The other one that I showed you earlier, where did I put that? Here it is. I use the same color, but it's like a floss. Same color, but it's like a floss. That I used for that body. Olive, red, black, tan are all good colors for that. Any questions?
I do. You said you used a size 12 hook so that we could see it better. What would you regularly use if you were tying that?
For being in Omaha here, I usually use these for bluegills. It's a nice high floating fly. I would probably 12 down to about say an 18. You could tie it smaller with smaller bunches of hair. But I personally think that by the time you're doing the hump and everything else, it's going to be pretty hard to do that on smaller than 20.
Okay.
Size 12 or a 10 would be excellent bluegill fly.
Jesse,
Mike.
could you mute your mic, please?
John, I didn't understand a word you said.
Yeah, I need to have you mute your mic. There you go. Good. We're getting an awful lot of feedback.
Mike,
Yeah, go ahead.
what I do sometimes, or I do it pretty much all the time now, when I tie in a tail, I always go up under the tail and over when I'm done tying it in.
Who's this?
This is Mike Miller.
Okay, yeah, I didn't recognize the voice.
It's like when you come up to the eyelet and you wrap underneath to build a dam. When I finish tying the tail in, I take one round under and over the tail to lock it in.
Okay.
Yeah,
What's wrong with doing that?
I like to do that because it does make sure the tail stays in, so it doesn't get pulled out.
Right, but actually, since I started this tail way up here, all those thread wraps, that tail's not going to pull out.
No, but
it's not a bad habit to get into, because there are some materials that could slip out of there, especially squirrel tail and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just like to do it because sometimes it gives it a little flair too.
Right.
Not a big flare, it just gives it a little flare out. So
Kicks it up a little bit.
But that's all I want to say.
All right.
Bye bye.
Now for the Humpy. This is a yellow Humpy. The tail is moose body hair, and we'll clean and stack that. This particular one, I think I used mousse for the back as well. I think if you have real dark black mousse body hair, an orange body with a black, coarse mousse tail, and then the back of mousse hair, I think that looks really, really nice. The wings in this case is deer hair. You can use elk as well. The back, you can use elk or deer hair. And again, in this case, I used moose. The body, again, you can use just about anything. This is a yellow thread. You can use floss, your rayon floss. Like in a 4-strand floss, I mean, you might want to use 2 strands or something like this, especially as you get smaller. And then the hackle is brown and grizzly mixed. So there's a lot of different ways of tying this fly. And if you want to see a lot of different ways of tying this fly, Al Beatty, who's with us tonight, he wrote a book on humpies. And there's several different ways of tying it explained in his book, with foam, with poly yarn for the wing and the hump. There's just a whole lot of ways of doing it, but it's basically a style of the fly. You see a lot of them on the internet. If you look up YouTube videos of the Humpy, there's a lot of them that are way overdressed. It's a heavily hackled fly, and it's intended to be used in fast water. So it's intended to be heavily hackled. Again, as you can see in this one, heavily hackled, and then it has that deer hair wing. But you see some of them on the internet that are so overdressed that they'll float, but they really don't look very, very buggy to me. So what I'm going to do is take, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more again here. So this is a patch. This is a patch of moose body hair. And the tips are pretty dark. And this is really, really hollow. You can see how thick those hair fibers are. I'm going to grab about 9 or 12. And again, just like the deer hair, I'm going to grab it by the tips about a third of the way down, and just take those short ones out and any of that under fur. So I'm left with the longest ones, and then there's like a second layer. You can see these right here, and that's about all I have left in there. So again, I'm going to go back to my hair stacker and stack those tips. I'll leave that sit there while I put in my thread. For this one, I'm going to use 140 denier ultra thread. It's nice and flat. It's red, and 140 denier is kind of thicker. I'm going to have to be careful with my bulk, but I want to use this for the underbody of the fly. So I have my thread base started. Now I'm going to go back to about the halfway point of the hook. Pull my hair out of the stacker in the direction I want to tie it in. And then I want the tail to be about the length of the hook. So I'm holding it at the eye, measuring it. And then I'll transfer this back to the back. And I know where my thread is hanging. I can mark where I want to cut that. It's up to you whether you want to cut the hair after you've tied it in. It makes a mess, and I've just kind of grown accustomed to cutting it before I tie it in. So now I've gone pretty tight there, and you can see if I let go of that moose hair, it's kind of flaring out. I want that tail to be a little more tight. So as I go back toward that back of the hook, I'm going to do looser wraps. It'll just kind of bunch that tail. And keep it tighter like that. Now over here, I can go as tight as I want to be, but it won't affect that hair and flare it out. So I hope that gives you a better idea of the flaring of the hair like that. So now I'm going to take some deer hair I'm going to use for the wing and the hump. I'm going to do this a little bit different. Some nice long deer hair. I'm going to cut it loose from the hopefully my phone doesn't run out of juice. I'm going to grab up here at about the third point and pull out this short stuff. Clean it out. If you leave any of that under fur in there and you try to stack it, it's not going to stack well, and then you're not going to be happy with the result. Again, I'm going to stack this hair.
This might be a silly question,
Go
but I
ahead.
know when you cut the ends of your hairs, it's a lot straighter than when you stack them. So what's the purpose of the stacker?
So let me put this hair back in the stacker so it's together. So when I take the hair off of the hide here, I can kind of fold it up with my scissors there and decide what I want for a, how many hairs I want, basically, just kind of eyeballing it. And then when I cut that close to the hide, of course, those tips are as aligned as they are on the hide. But you can see if I pull that off of there, you've got a lot of different lengths. Now, this isn't very good quality deer hair, very good quality for comparaduns and stuff like that. You've got very even tips. But what I can do with this is take the longest, and then you can see most of the hairs are this second layer. I can use those and get rid of all of this really short stuff from the base of that. So when I clean that out, these tips were all cut short, but my tips of the hair out here are uneven. So I put it in the hair stacker with these points down, and basically that takes that all, and I'll show you the result.
Okay, I see, because you don't want to cut the tips. You just want them to be straight.
You're right. You don't want to cut the tips. You want those natural tips like that. So
Okay,
now if I look at this end, my tips are even. But then if you look at the butts, they're all like
They're all over the place.
right.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Yes, no problem. So what I want to do now is I want my wing to be about the length of the hook shank. But then I want my hump to go to about here. So I want to tie it in right back there. Did that make sense? You want me to go through that again? I'm measuring my hair by using my thumb and the hook shank. So since I want my wing to be about that long, right there, I'm going to fold this over and kind of like on the Tom thumb and use that as the wing. So there's my wing. My hump is going to go to about right here. So I know that's where I need to have it tied down at the back. So I'm going to come forward a little bit here, right about here. That's where I want it tied at the back. So there's where I'm going to cut my hair. Spin my bobbin counterclockwise. Tie that down nice and tight. And then come back with kind of moderate tightness there. And then at the end, I can come down a little bit tighter. Now, as I come forward, I'm doing close touching wraps to make a nice underbody. So when I look at the bottom of that, all I see is red thread. Now, if I take my bobbin, as you wrap like this, you're putting a twist into the thread. I think you can kind of see that. Let me zoom in a little bit. I don't know if you can see that my bobbin's spinning a little bit. If I take that and I spin it counterclockwise again, as if I'm looking down on it, another thing that does is it flattens the thread. So now you can see it's a little more flat. So then when I make my wraps, it's making a smooth body. See how that's flattened out? I'll take it and spin it a little bit more. And flatten my thread. Spin it a little bit more and come forward. So now I'm going to have trouble separating this.
I have a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
At what point do you worry about the bolt? You had said it earlier, and I just was curious.
Mostly the time you have trouble with bulk is at the head of the fly, where you're trying to make a nice smooth head, a small head that's not crowding the eye, so you can get your tippet in the eye of the hook. So I'm going to take that wing, I'm going to tie my hump down like that. And I'm going to wrap forward and then stand that wing up by wrapping in front of it. And here's where that bigger thread gives me a little bit of an advantage because I can bulk that up. And there's my wing. Now you want to ramp here because I'm going to wrap hackle and I want to make sure that's a smooth area to wrap that hackle. Now my wing is stood up. You can separate the wing like this. and make figure eight wraps between it and separate out the wings. Normally when I tie these for my fishing flies, I just leave them like a comparadun. I just leave them like this as the indication of a wing.
Yeah.
But you can wrap between them and separate those out and then post them. And
They come together.
then you end up with separate wings splayed out.
I'll try a Swiss cheese and mushroom.
So now I'm going to take a grizzly hackle that's sized to a size 12. And where the stem is real thick and it starts to get thinner, right in here, that's where I'm going to strip off a few of these barbules where I have just the bare stem. And I'm going to tie that in with, back here to behind the wing. I'm going to tie that in with a little bit of that stem sticking out. I don't want to go right up against those bottom barbules. I want that little bit of stem showing so that my first couple wraps, I'm not going to be twisting up the hackle. And then I'll tie in the rest of that stem. Then I have a, this is actually a saddle. I'll show you the materials here in a little bit. I'll do the same for that for my brown. Leave a little bit of that stem showing. Too much. Oops. Make sure there's a nice smooth ramp there to wrap my hackle on. And now I'll take a hackle pliers. I'll use a plunger style here. And now when I take that first wrap, you can see that the hackle is perpendicular instead of getting wrapped over. So I'm going to take 2 to 3 wraps behind and I'll do 3 wraps in front. This is where bulk can become a problem. I'll take 2 wraps. Keeping my thread tight. And then I'll wrap back over that. And then holding my thread real tight and snap that hackle stem. Now, oh, my brown came loose, so this is just going to have grizzly hackle. Do a couple of half hitches. And then if you do a double and another one that's like a whip finish, pull that nice and tight. And cut my thread. That would have looked a lot better with that brown hackle going through there. But there's no way to recover from that without completely unwrapping that hackle. That's a red Humpy.
Hey, can you show the hackle pliers and how you used it?
Yeah. So here's a bare hook. I'll just throw some thread on it real quick. There's a lot of different styles of hackle pliers. If I was using like this brown, this thing's about probably 5 inches long. I could wrap that with my hands easily just by tying it in. And then I can just go hand over hand and wrap this hackle easily. I'll just take it off of there. So where a hackle pliers comes in handy is with your shorter, like this is really short. This is the tip I had left from that last fly. So I'll tie in the stem here, nice and tight. And then I've just got this short thing. I can't do hand over hand with this. It's just going to be real difficult. So this is actually an electronic test clip. You can see where the probe would screw into it. They call it plunger style because it goes in and out like that. You can use these as a hackle pliers because it grabs that hackle by the tip and then holds it pretty tight. And then you can use that so your fingers aren't in the way to wrap that hackle. There's some other styles. There's this is what I used for years. It came in a kit. It's pretty cheap, but it's basically spring loaded. And you grab it by the tip, and then that holds it. It also gives you a little bit of weight. So if you need to let go of it, that hackle pliers is going to hold it in place so it doesn't slip and get looser on you. That's that style. And then most of them are really that sort of a. Here's one of my favorites. It's got a brass pad right there that has little etchings in it, and then the other side is a little rubber pad. That grips the hackle really, really nice and lets you wrap it. Does that answer your question?
Sometimes, Mike, I hold too tightly and pull down on it, and then I break the tip of my hackle off. So I'm trying to learn just to let the.
I still do that.
Oh, you do?
Some of these they have kind of sharp edges like this one, and a lot of times I'll break the hackle, break the tip out of the hackle, and you just have to grab it again and go back at it. The advantage of these, zoom back out again. Hopefully I won't lose I think my phone's about to die here. This is a whiting dry fly hackle. They call it a 100s pack. They're all pretty much sized around a 14. I would say there's probably 12, maybe to 16 in there. You can see that some of them are more narrow. A couple different colors of brown. But this is a real cheap way to buy the real high quality hackle. You can take one of these feathers. Some of them are 8 or 9 inches long, and some of this up here is like Gretchen refers to it as a Christmas tree hackle. It's wider down here at the base, and then it gets narrower as it gets toward the tip. But once you get out to these tips, this whole feather from about here on is a very consistent length of hackle. And so, like I showed you on here, you can use this and just easily go hand over hand because the feather's so long. And it, instead of grabbing a hackle, pliers and all that, you can do a pretty good hackle just by doing it hand over hand. A lot of the, really when the hackle pliers was basically invented, I don't know if I have one handy here. But a lot of the necks that people used in the 30s, 40s, 50s were about like this. So you get a size 12 feather, it's going to be, you know, that's not even a 12, that's maybe closer to a 10. But your feathers are about that long of usable hackle right there. And so a lot of times on a heavily hackled fly, you might have to use 2 or 3 feathers. So obviously there wasn't a lot of hand over hand in the 30s and 40s and whenever the hackle pliers was invented. Any other questions?